So first off, I think I'm probably preaching to the choir here. The reason this quote means something to me is when people say content marketing is all the marketing that's left, I hope that's not a self-flagellative, is that a word? Self-flagellative, self-flagellating something or other. Anyway, comment that. But the reason that I believe this is very important is if you think about the world we live in today and the fact that all of your competitors, all brands, are going to have access to the same data, the same marketing automation tools, the same advanced CRM systems, the advanced content management systems that measure bloody everything and can automate everything, how do you differentiate? So Forrester talks about this idea of emotional moments and how we create emotional moments with customers, and we know unequivocally that that's ultimately what drives value and lifetime loyalty. It has got to be about the content. But when we say content, it's not just about the words on a website. It's about the people. It's your sales folks. It's the retail experience. It's the customer service experience. Anywhere where there's a conversation is content, right? So in that world, we need to think about how we become better at creating emotional moments with our customers. However, and actually, my industry is really guilty of this, right? I mean, I think most of us here are in the world of data analytics in some way. We've created an economy around vanity metrics. We're in a vanity trap in the way that we measure things. And I believe fervently that you get the behavior you measure. So you ask me to get you 500,000 Facebook fans, I'll get you 500,000 Facebook fans. But does that actually deliver an ROI? Mostly not. And I've got plenty of examples of achieving those metrics that doesn't actually drive incremental value. And part of that is because we focused on outputs, not outcomes. I cannot tell you how many clients come to us and their content strategy is, I need 850 case studies by the end of the fiscal. I need 3 blogs a week, 2 tweets a day, and 5 sales enablement presentations. That's not a content strategy, it's output focused. That's about hitting a number, it's not about achieving an outcome, okay? And part of the bizarre thing about it is no one argues, so these are actually metrics from the CMI. Those who do this well achieve 8 times more traffic, 62% less cost, but 3 times as many leads, and 6 times the conversion rate. So if we know all of this, why are we still focusing on those vanity metrics? We believe that part of the reason for that is that with the best intent in the world, businesses focus on what they want to say rather than what audiences want to hear. And there's no excuse for this anymore, frankly. Customers and audiences, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, I always get this question, well, if you're looking in social, my industry, I'm selling to farmers and I'm selling combine harvesters to farmers. There's no way that you can find any data that's going to help me. It's not true. People are generating data for us faster than we can. Yet we're still obsessing about we're measuring everything, but are we actually really measuring what matters? And customers are generating this data and they're using their language, yet we're still structuring that data in really simplistic ways based on numbers of mentions or share of voice. We're not really using the tools at our disposal to structure that linguistic data in a way that helps us understand how what we're saying marries with what they're saying. It's a very simple principle, a very simple question, and a very simple set of analyses to do. And this is another one of my favorite quotes. Another reason that we end up being very output, not outcome focused. I love this. Behind every piece of bad content is an executive who asks for it. Present company accepted, of course, if you are an executive. But it's true. The reason we focus on what we want to say is, we've decided our mission this year and we do as much B2B as we do B2C work. And in B2B, guess what? It's not a secret that everyone is focused on digital transformation. You can't own it. The number of times that people come to us and they say, no, we're the leaders, we want to own this topic. But it's driven by what people want to say, and it's driven by an executive with the best will in the world. If you don't have the right measures to begin with, you're not going to achieve that right outcome. And that goes all the way back to the executive. And quite often, the other thing we find is when clients don't get their supposed outcomes or outputs or metrics that they're looking for, they'll blame how much of it we've done. They said, well, clearly we didn't do enough. So we need to up it. We need to reach more people, more loudly, with more content. That's not the case. It's about making it resonate, which sounds very obvious, but when you're sitting across the table for a client, they're so focused on quantity that it's very hard sometimes to persuade them that actually you can drive greater ROI through focusing on resonance than the vanity metrics. Another statistic that I love to share with people that even further demonstrates this idea of the importance of resonance is that when you actually linguistically look at what people talk about in their own context, let's take social data as an example. And when we say social, I mean linguistic. I hate the term social because everyone just thinks Facebook and Twitter. So we look at anything that has an RSS feed, we can gather that data anywhere people are talking online. Less than 5% of what people talk about mentions a product or a brand at all, which means that if in your content, think about it, if you're starting from a category perspective, you're missing up to 95% of what actually matters to customers. What does that mean? That means you're only relevant in probably about a fifth, generously, of the customer journey that is influencing whether they choose your brand and engage with your brand and are loyal to your brand. So I'll give a financial services example. So, and we all bank. We all have credit cards, presumably. In my case, way too many. But how often are you online espousing the virtues of your credit card and the shape of the card and the color of the card and the interest rate? You're not. But you know what people do talk about online? Money. People talk a lot about money and the emotion around money and how they feel about money. And that also, using this linguistic data, which, by the way, we can go back 10 years in time, so we can create trend retrospectively. So we can look at how the language of money evolves over time and the level of emotion and what creates those emotional moments, what creates that anxiety. So when you think about your brand and you think about your why, try and find that higher order problem. So when it comes to financial services, what customers actually want you to do is take the emotional energy, the anxiety out of money management. That's what they want. They don't want a credit card with a better interest rate. Yeah, maybe for that day. But over time, the way you create emotional moments is that way. When you start measuring that differently, and you're not just tracking mentions of you, and you're looking at tracking money over time, your opportunities to extend your resonance across a journey becomes that much broader, because you're not just there when they've made a decision to invest in a product. You're there as they're going through their different money mind states and their anxieties. And that is also part of the role of content marketing. It's not just to drive a sale. It's to think top of funnel to create lifetime value. And I could go on. I can create, anyone can challenge me on, what's your why? But that's one of the first questions we work with clients. And it's often the hardest thing, actually, for people to answer is, what's your why? So anyway, so bear that in mind. And so, the other thing I would say is, guess who talks most about your brand online? You. Right? So if you've got social tools and you're tracking mentions of your brand, you go, oh, wow, look at our share of voice this month. We launched our campaign and look, we're dominating. Like, of course you bloody are, right? You've just spent $40 million or something ludicrous on launching a piece of tech and you're surprised that sentiment's quite good this month. And share of voice has increased. So you've got to be disciplined about making sure that you're truly isolating what customers and influencers are talking about versus what you're saying. And this brings me on to why resonance is so important. It sounds sort of trite to say it, but relevance is no longer enough. And I'll come on to a story that will illustrate that in a second. We talk about customer resonance. We want to be the heavy stone in the pond that creates many ripples, that makes your content have the longest possible life cycle. Being relevant can be transactional. We actually find that most of our clients' content isn't actually that irrelevant. Most people are quite committed to understanding the customer these days. They don't always get it right, but there's certainly a commitment to. But resonance ups the ante. And so part of the way that we think about resonance is we look at content that is most shared, the conversations that have the deepest and loudest voice. And the economics, do you have a question or are you just stretching? No, I'm sorry. Sorry. Actually, the audience is supposed to heckle the speaker, not the other way around, right? Sorry. It's the end of the day. So we talk about this idea of resonance. So we up the ante. The economics around sharing have been very, very well proven. So when we think about this data science that we use behind the linguistic data, that's what we're really focused on, is the network of the content and how it moves. And the principle is actually embarrassingly simple. I'm always worried that someone's going to steal it. So far, they haven't. But we look at 2 data sets. So if you think about this idea of what you're saying, what your competitors are saying, what the best practice brands are saying, there's 2 things you need to think about. What are you saying, and what do they care about? And the principle of our measurement system is to create as great an overlap between those 2 conversations, okay? So this Venn diagram, as ridiculously simple as it looks, genuinely reflects the way that we structure linguistic data, and therefore the way in which we create writer's guides, the way that we create the brief for the content we're producing, is we literally create a data set that looks at what brands are saying, and we create a data set around what audiences are saying, and we look at the extent to which those 2 worlds overlap, and we score it. It's a little bit like a lookalike model, except it's with words instead of numbers, okay? So what is resonance? So we look at the 3 C's. We talked about the 3 C's at the beginning. So the first thing, the pillar of it, is we look at the customer. So who are you trying to target? So one size does not fit all, right? We need to make sure that we understand, to a certain degree, the level of personalization that's important. The second thing we look at is the content, the words that you're using and the channels that you're communicating in. And the third thing is the context. Okay, so where are they? Which form factors are they engaging with? And what's the journey? Where do they go next? How often do people think about that? Right, it's not just the initial content you need to think about, but it's driving that content journey. Everyone, I'm sure, has got customer journey maps and personas coming out of every orifice, right? We've been doing that for years. How many of you have content archetypes or content journeys? You do. And how do you do that out of interest? Yeah. But you must know that that's quite unusual. Your clients must react positively when you say there's a topical journey we need to think about in addition to a touch point journey, right? So that's how we define this. And actually, the example I give, how many people here have heard of Joshua Bell? Well, I know you have. You've heard this presentation before. So what's the story you know? And so Joshua Bell, for those who don't know, is, and I don't know how you establish this, but he's supposedly the best violinist on the planet, I guess because people pay the most to see him. I don't know, how do you establish that? But anyway, so he's the best violinist on the planet. So there's no issue here with the content when it comes to him, right? So what he did, as you've just described, is an experiment in New York and DC subways where he played during rush hour every morning to see if anybody would stop. And I think it was a proof of social identity theory, something like that. Would, you know, if someone stopped, would somebody else stop? And is that part of how we identify with experiences? Anyway, so nobody stopped. I think in the several days he did this, one person recognized him and stopped, and then others did as well because he recruited others. So looking at this through the lens of the 3 C's, in this instance, this is and he's got the most expensive violin on the planet. It's a $4 million violin or something absurd. Best content ever, right? Was his target customer there, though, in the subway at rush hour? And actually, even if the target customer was there, is it the right context for him to be playing a concerto at 8:30 when everyone's kind of grumpy on the DC, you know, at 90-degree heat or whatever it is? No. So that's how we break it down. So when you think about being resonant, it's not enough to have the highest quality content with the best imagery and the best creative. You have to take all 3 into account.